Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a edition of We Have Something to Say. So it's a very, very special edition for me. Kenneth couldn't be on today because he has a credential class he has to go to that started at the same time. So I finally got our favorite person who always turns that zero at the top to one, Marion McMillan. Marion McMillan to come on. And when Kenneth told me he couldn't come on, I was trying to come up with some ideas about what I want to talk about, but I came up with something I really want to start doing, which is I think it's important for some of us to hear from people who were born before me about what they think about the election, the state of the country, particularly people who were born during segregation, when it was bad. I think that so many times people like me get on here and I've read about it, I heard about it from my parents, but we don't talk to people, and you all don't get to hear from people who actually lived through it, who actually lived through segregation and how they see it. Marion and I, our views typically align quite a bit, and they align quite a bit. And I know mine are probably, as somebody told me the other day, you seem to be radical. And I'm always puzzled by that statement when they say that. Not that I'm radical, but that they use that term radicalized when I say stuff like, you got to protect your community, or what do you have? And I'm always amazed by the pushback I get. I was talking to one of my best friends yesterday about a situation in a situation that they're going through, and they were talking about public embarrassment, and I said to him, literally, don't nobody give a fuck about you, or what you perceive as public embarrassment. We have no power, so who's gonna be embarrassed? Like you get what I'm saying? We don't really control anything in the state like we think we do. We control some parts of Atlanta, but the rest of the state. So what I'd like you to do is just tell us about your experiences growing up as a young man during segregation, and why do you think we have such, as you told me earlier, apathy in what's going on in the country? Because what I see, and I ask you this all the time, I see a group of people teeing up that on January 20th, they're ready to either swing that bat and hit that ball, or swing that club and hit that ball straight down the fairway. That's not going to be any to me, it's not going to be any good to us. And I just want to know, sometimes when I call you, am I being paranoid, or do you see it from your life experiences too?
No, Leonard, you're not paranoid. First, to educate some of your audience, I was born when Truman was president. So I think you were born when Kennedy was president. So there is even though we're both technically baby boomers, I did see, I remember going to see Martin Luther King in the flesh numerous times. And I don't have to read about water fountains, but the separate water fountains, because I had a drink out of those type water fountains. I rode on the back of the bus. I remember clearly a situation when my younger brother one day, had the whatever in him, and he decided to sit behind the bus driver. And we all walked to the back of the bus with my mother, and my mother was constantly, hollering at him, telling him he's going to get us in trouble because he was sitting behind behind the bus driver. And so yes, I definitely remember those times. And in terms of apathy, yes, it is apathy, and it's killing us. I can't hear you.
My bad. How did segregation affect your life and how you looked at life and how did your parents prepare you, if you remember, for what was going to come, what could potentially come to pass because you were an African-American male growing up during that time? How did they prepare you for life? I mean, how did they prepare you for the mindset you have that you got to put your head down and keep working? And how did that affect you going throughout high school?
Well, I grew up, like I said, during segregation. The schools were all segregated. In Bibb County, in Macon, Georgia, where I was born, the schools were doubly segregated because in the white schools, the females and males were separated in high schools, whereas in the black schools, they didn't care. It was co-ed all the way through. Now, to answer your other question, I was always told, and by my parents and by others, that you were always going to be classified as second. So you always had to try harder because you're always going to have the man's knee on your neck. And that was expected. Don't think that you're going to be like them. You are like them, but don't expect that. Always expect to have the man's knee on your neck.
Do you looking as somebody who reads a lot and pays attention a lot, which you do, are you fearful about what you're seeing the administration done are you fearful from the point of view, like me, I'm literally sitting here going, do they not see what I see? Are you, or am I, again, for somebody that can remember it vividly, are you just going, well, no, not really?
Like I said, when I was growing up, segregation was all around you. And the roads in Bibb County, for example, in the black communities were primarily dirt, whereas the white communities' roads were paved. Where we lived in what I call a black enclave, because my father's parents and their parents owned the land. So all around us, the roads were paved. Our road was the only one that wasn't paved. And it wasn't because it wasn't paying taxes. That was the way things were. They were designed. And
so wait. So you're saying that because I want you to stress this point. You're saying that y'all were paying taxes. They were taking your taxes, but you weren't getting any social services.
No. In fact, it's a famous case here in Bibb County, in Macon, Georgia, where there was a public park named Baconsfield. And in that park was a huge monument in stone that said that this park is for white women and their children, and that black folks were not allowed. We were paying taxes for that park, okay? But we were not allowed to go to it. That case went all the way to the Georgia Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court because the land was given to the city of Macon by this senator named Augustus O. Bacon. He was a U.S. senator, and when he died, he left the land to Bibb County in perpetuity. But they had to abide by that segregationist statement. Bibb County, I tell folks, and if you read, ever heard something that Lena Horne said, or Hank Aaron said, or Jackie Robinson said when he played in Macon at Luther B. Williams Baseball Park, was the most racist city that he ever encountered. The John Birch Society, for example, was started in Macon, Georgia.
Did not know that.
There are Confederate statues of one in Macon, Georgia, that are facing north, just like a lot of cities in the South below Atlanta have these Confederate statues that are maintained by the city. And we still have that because the state of Georgia passed this monument statute, just like with Stone Mountain, that they can't be torn down, even though Bibb County is a predominantly Black city.
What do you make of the sentiment of people who say, as somebody who's lived through it and who's been fairly successful, because you had a successful insurance agency, who say you all just want to be stuck in victimhood? What do you agree with that to some degree? Do you say, how do you answer that? How do you see that?
No, it's not victimhood, because we were never allowed. We had a brief period after the Civil War when things were almost on an even key. But when the Republicans, and I do want to point this out to people, when the Republicans made the deal with the Democrats to allow Rutherford B. Hayes to be president, we were sold down the river. Our rights were given up. So yes, some people say, well, the Democrats were the racist party, and I agree with that 100%. But the reason we lost our foothold is because the Republicans sold us down the river.
Do you see some do you see some parallels to what's going on right now with what you just said? Because I see parallels.
Definitely between the I remember the Democrats said at their conventions and that we're not going back. We're definitely going back. Now, of course, Obama got elected.
Hey, Ross.
And Obama got elected, and Kamala, ran for president. But I think Obama, in my opinion, created Trump. And the majority race, and that's what I want to call the majority race, they're seeing things slip, and they don't want to see things slip. Although economically, we as Black folks own a tremendous amount, we spend a tremendous amount of money, trillions of dollars, okay? But we don't own anything. There are very few Black businesses. I can remember this when I was working for a bank in Macon, Georgia called CNS Bank. And I was in the management training program. And the civil rights laws had been passed, and the bank was under pressure to use Black services. So I was in this section of the bank called corporate services, where we looked at the business side of the businesses in Macon, Georgia. And so they, since I was the only Black there, they came to me and asked me what Black businesses in Macon, Georgia could use some of these services that they were looking for, like Norfolk Southern Railroad, for example. They came to CNS Bank because they want to know what businesses were out there that could use their services. There were none. There were some funeral homes. So, there were some people that might be able to use, some caskets, but we didn't even own the casket companies. There was a large Black contractor, sort of like Herman Russell, but much smaller than Herman Russell. But he was a residential contractor, so he wasn't a commercial contractor. So it wasn't like he had all these large amount of subs, and he was using a large amount of material and stuff like that, so they could use their services. So using that as an example, we we just didn't own anything. I mean, we were spenders, and continue to be spenders.
What about in your enclave though, Marion? You telling me that? So are you saying the type of businesses that were owned? When you say I'm assuming that you're saying we didn't own any manufacturing base, like we didn't make anything. And
right. We didn't. I mean, even for the we had mom and pop type services. So in terms of these companies wanting to come to us, okay, that just wasn't enough businesses to make it have an impact. You know, if you some of these businesses, for example, said I only do business with somebody that can give me $1 million a year in business. There were no businesses in Macon, Georgia, black businesses that were doing $1 million worth of business.
So during segregation, I remember my mom telling me this story. And she grew up in segregated Augusta. My mom said that she can vividly remember that there was this event room where all the big events for the African American community happened. It was like in Augusta, it was like I don't want her to say it was like a 36 block area in Augusta, but don't quote me on it. But she says, I can remember during segregation, this place stayed busy. Weddings, parties, they were booked all the time. They made a great living. And she said, and I can remember right after desegregation, they were out of business in 2 years. She said they were gone. And I guess my question is, so was more of the wealth, did more of the wealth stay in African American communities, even though there were mom and pop stores? Because you get what I'm saying? Like,
well, in terms of Macon, there are black enclaves, is what you use. There's sections of Macon that are still here called Fort Hill, Pleasant Hill, Unionville, Stinsonville, Belvedere. There are sections of Macon, and they had these small mom and pop little stores. And even when segregation was stopped, these businesses, they still were mom and pops. They were not big enough, or in other words, they didn't grow. And so when desegregation came, black folks stopped using them as a general rule. And and once these people died off, their children didn't continue. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Where? So from your vantage point right now, where you're sitting with all your life experiences, what do you think we missed the mark? I always thought the Civil Rights Bill, the more I think about it, was really a bill of taxation without representation, right? Like you taking money from us, but we don't get any services from the money you're taking. And one of the reasons we don't get any services because we don't have any black representation anyway. Kind of how I feel like about Alabama right now, with them having 2 majority black districts that they can have congressmen for. So where do you think we missed the mark? Where do you think? Because we have more money, right, Marion? We make more money.
A tremendous amount.
We make more money.
There's no comparison about the amount of spending power.
Right. It's $1.6 trillion right now. It's $1.6 trillion.
Right.
So where did we miss the mark? Where did people like my parents where would you say, well, because we seem to be weaker about we make more money, but it's kind of like we aren't like this, we're like this.
Well, I think we missed the mark in terms of continuing to educate our children on what happened in the past, what continues to happen. We decided that we were not going to tell them the horror stories about the way it was, and that's what I did with my parents, with my children. I didn't tell them everything that happened to me when I was growing up.
Why?
Because I wanted them to have a different perspective in terms of meeting the majority race than I did. I didn't want them to always be looking at them at the side of their eye, for example. Uh, um, and I remember clearly when my son invited a friend of his to my house, a white guy, white boy, to stay overnight. So when he invited the guy, and I knew the guy's parents because his parents were stone cold racists. I went to high school with them. Okay, mother and father were stone cold racists. So after he left, and that's when I told him that. He said, "Dad, if you had told me that, I wouldn't invite him to my house." And I said, "Well, son, obviously you have a different relationship with him than I had with his parents. So, using that as an example, it's why I didn't want to tell those stories."
Do you think that reluctance to tell those stories has led us to where we are right now?
I think so, because my Jewish brethren continually tell those stories. I mean, they have a wide booth to tell those stories, like Schindler's List, whatever, Holocaust Museum, you name it. I mean, they're constantly, and they dare you to come out here and criticize them for continually harping on it.
Mary, I've heard people younger than me, I've seen this on social media, say, "I'm tired of seeing movies about Black victimhood, like 12 Years a Slave." And I'm always astonished. And I'm always like, there might be 5 movies like that. Maybe let's say 20. I can't name 20. But I'm like, Holocaust movies are powerful and everywhere. And these people in my community who say, "I don't want to see Black victimhood," and I tell people, I don't know anybody I don't know a Black person that wants to be victimized like that. Maybe my circle is small, but I don't even know poor people that want to be victimized every day. They might have gotten a victim mentality from all the stuff that's done to them. It's the only way they can survive. But I don't want to get on a tangent. So what you're saying is, or what I'm hearing, is that the reluctance to tell the stories have now seemed to have not played out the way you thought they would play out, which is
definitely, because they can't tell you this. Now they can't tell their children those stories because you didn't tell it to them. And now I'm writing a book about my family. Okay. I'm almost finished, and including all those stories in that book, because I want my grandchildren and to know about what happened. There's one of my relatives on my mother's side, during the FDR administration, had something called the WPA, Workers Progress Administration, and she was interviewed. One of the few slaves that were interviewed, and asked about what happened in slavery. I have her complete transcript. In fact, I looked at it yesterday, where she told what happened in slavery. So that's in my book, because I want them to not get it sanitized or have someone like DeSantis keep them from reading about it. And for 3 whole type pages, she tells exactly what happened to her, because when she when the Civil War ended, she was 12 years old, and she told how she had these palm fronds, that her job was to keep the master cool on his front porch, and how she was whipped when she got tired. But that was her job, to keep the master cool. That's one of her stories.
Marvine made a comment, and I'm gonna bring her on to tell this story one day. But I remember she told the story on Facebook that every time I think about it, even sitting here thinking about it right now, as sweet as Marvine is, and I spent time at my cousin Leonard, who was her father's farm, and he had Marvine, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 daughters and 2 boys, and Marvine told me that when she was at Strom Thurmond High School, when it integrated, we were having this conversation, and I want you to talk about this. I said, Marvine, I learned a long time ago, it dawned on me, my dad, unlike my mom, grew up in a system of terrorism. We don't like to say that's what it was, but that's what it was. It was systematic terrorism. And then she told me, she was explaining to me that when she was at Strom Thurmond High School and Martin Luther King was assassinated, and her dad had made them go to integrate Strom Thurmond High School, that when she went into class that day, the kids in the class stood up and started cheering because Dr. King had been assassinated. And
I can go one better than her. I remember clearly when Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. I was on my high school's baseball team. I was the only black on the baseball team. And when it occurred, and back then there were no portable phones, anything like that. So the coach heard about it on the radio. Okay. The white guys on the baseball team cheered. Okay. So I very clearly, I can remember 1968. I don't have to look in a book to tell where I was when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Just like most folks in my generation don't have to look in the book to remember when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated.
Did you do you feel like, I don't even know how to articulate it without just being blunt about, but you and I have talked about this for a while, and for y'all don't know, I'll sometimes call Marion and go, man, tell me what you think about it. So tell me if I'm tripping based on your life experience. Because I always want to base it on people's life experience. Do you think that there's not a healthy fear of Black men by other minorities, that they keep doing some of the stuff they do to us? And do you think there should be? Go ahead.
I think they fear Black men in terms of our sexualization, because they're always talking about that. In fact, if I don't know where you got a chance to see this or not, Jamie Foxx has a special on.
I haven't seen it, but I'm gonna watch it. Yeah. Okay.
Jamie Foxx alludes to that in his special. They have that's the way they think about us in terms of that vein. But no, there's no fear. We are a leaderless rabble. And I say this all the time because the Black Lives Matter movement was temporary, in my opinion, because it was leaderless. Some people say we don't need a quote Black leader.
That's Kenneth.
Okay. I'm of the opinion every movement needs a leader. During the civil rights movement, they were going off in different directions until they decided to bring in that 25, 26-year-old preacher from Atlanta, Georgia.
I tell
them head of the SCLC, because you had all these disparate organizations that were going their different ways. You need to be organized. And some people say, well, the white folks don't have a leader. And I said, yes, they do. the current leader of the white white races is Donald J. Trump. I mean, he is the de facto leader of the white races.
I don't know if you read just what Marvin put up. Do you? I've been talking to you about this for a while. I've been saying, and I've told my little brother this, and again, I always feel like when people say, "Well, you're just being," I don't even know what people are saying anymore, because sometimes I'm starting to shut down. I've always said that what we're seeing not only happened with Obama, but it also started with George Zimmerman. And I've always equated it to the playground for me. I don't know how anybody else does. And I said, when George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin, we were willing to go through the system, right? And even if the outcome wasn't what we wanted. But I said, there was a problem. There was a shift when he started bragging about what he did on the internet. Like when he started selling Skittles and iced tea after he had got off. And I've always believed that because he didn't pay a price for that, or because he didn't think he could be touched for that, to me, it seems to have escalated that people just are saying whatever they want to say. And I don't see that with other groups. Like you, because we always seem to be the tip of the spear to get racist legislation done, right? In my opinion. Right. And it's kind of like being on the basketball court when I was little, playground. It wasn't the fact that you got beat, you got put off on them. You know how you take turns playing, whoever lost had to go sit on the sidelines, right? And then the winner kept going on. But if the winner started talking shit while you were on the sideline, that ticked you off more, because you could deal with losing, but you couldn't deal with humiliation.
Right.
And it was the humiliation that I thought started with the George Zimmerman thing, and that we weren't willing to say, hey, look, we done been through enough humiliation. No, that time has passed. We gained the ground to say we're not just going to take humiliation, that you're going to make. As I tell people right now, what I see happen is people building their brand off our pain. That's what I tell people. It is now an industry to build brand off our pain, and our leaders are in the mirrors.
Okay.
I told you that. There's Kenneth for you. Look, Kenneth said that just because you said that. So you now have a chance to be on our show to Dr. Lively, and he can't come back unless he's texting, because he's supposed to be in certification, which means Go ahead, Mary. I'm gonna let you refute Dr. Lively.
Okay, I want to deal with Dr. Lively first. Then I want to talk about Marvin. As I said before, all people need leaders. I mean, one of the reasons why, if you look at history, the reason why the American Aborigines got beat is because they were many disparate tribes. I think some people said there was as many as 10 million American Aborigines here when the Europeans came. And because they were so separated by languages and by tribes, the Europeans could easily defeat them. So in terms of what Dr. Lively said, I highly disagree. Now, I want to get back to something Marvin was saying about the books. I clearly remember the books also, where you would get a book and you would see the other person's name in the book, and the books were drawn through or underlined. On a general basis, I think they said we were 4 to 5 years behind the white students.
But I got a question for that. I don't want you to. So how does it seem that you all were taught better in one-room schools, and you had the will to learn? And then I want to do something John Watson said. Because I don't think people know that you read a lot. Like I think people. I want people to understand. Marion reads a lot. Like he reads a lot. which is why he and I probably always we talk, because he reads a lot. And how is it the will? I keep saying it's the will.
Okay. I can just, I'm going to continue on with Marvin and also answer your question.
Okay.
When my mother graduated from high school, she was number 2 in her class. She was salutatorian. Okay, this was in 1943 or 1944 when my mother graduated from high school. So when she left Macon, Georgia, she went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and she applied to Marquette University in Milwaukee. She was told that she would have to take a year or 2 of remedial classes before she could get into the main Marquette University. And she was told that because the schools there said their experience was that kids from the South and Black kids especially were behind. For example, my mother in high school never had one course of algebra, never had a geometry course. She was taught math and home economics math in particular. So that's what I want to, get in terms of getting back to Marvin.
But it didn't stop you. That's my point, Ben.
And so my mother, that's what I want to emphasize, getting back to that. My mother always made sure that we, more so than my father, made sure that there were books in our house. We had this set of encyclopedias. Okay. That were a boom because our library was segregated here in Macon, Georgia. The Hutchings Library was where the Black folks went. And when you finally were able to go to the white library, you saw the difference based on what Hutchings had and what the Washington Library had. It was night and day. So again, like I said, you were pushed and by a lot of Black folks. You were told during my time, you must go to college. You must get a higher education. They didn't necessarily tell you what to major in. But they just knew that if you went to college, you were going to get ahead. And you were given help by other people in the community. When people found out, for example, that you were going to college, people cheered you on. There was no, like it is nowadays, I heard, like crabs in a barrel, people pulling you down. People were pushing you.
So you agree with that sentiment that it's like crabs in a barrel? And if you agree, and if you agree with it in your experience, because you just said that, hey, in my day, people were pushing. When you went to college, people were cheering you. And I can remember, but I grew up in a different set of circumstances because I grew up in probably an affluent Black family, as you know. So we were having a certain expectation.
Yeah, you were definitely one of the talented 10.
Until look, I'm glad John's sitting right here. Until I got to Morehouse and realized I might have thought I was one of the talented 10 until people like John walked in the room and I realized that my intelligence was at Augusta, Georgia intelligence level, not a Chicago public school intelligence level. It was two different levels of preparation. And I was introduced to that very, very quickly. I don't even know if it matters, Mary. But I still got to ask the question because I'm just perplexed. Where do you think that split? Like, where do you think that intelligence was it after desegregation? Because it seems to me the only thing I can pinpoint, and you knew my father, Marion, and he and I only got into one argument. I can remember being grown, only getting into one big argument with him, Marion, one big one.
I still have your father's book.
Yeah, and I remember him. He sat there and I said, "Dad, I think I was like 29, 28, 29. I said, Dad, the problem with desegregation wasn't the principle of desegregation. As I see it, the problem is, as soon as it happened, y'all made it seem like their ice was colder than the other ice, and you left. Whereas during segregation, there were these images of successful African-American men and women that were around people who weren't as successful, but they saw what success was. Am I off base with that? Is that
no? Because during the segregation times, the few black doctors and and all the teachers lived in black neighborhoods. After desegregation, and people were allowed to move in a different neighborhood, they did. So the kids growing up, for example, did see a Dr. George Johnston in their neighborhood because he was now living in a predominant, what used to be a predominant white neighborhood. They didn't see the black teachers because the black teachers were also had moved to those neighborhoods. So it was a desert of people imitate who they see a lot of times. For example, I'm laughing myself about what Dr. Lively just said. But people, for example, in my barbershop that I go to, that I talk about all the time.
I want you to talk about that. I really want you to talk about that.
Just recently, when I was getting my haircut, one of the guys alluded to a person who he thought was a millionaire. And I told him that guy wouldn't be who I would thought would be a millionaire. I said, when I mentioned some names, like Herman Russell or, the car dealers in Atlanta, like Bronco, whatever his name was, or even some of the other guys, not just athletes, but definitely millionaires. He didn't know who those people were. But this guy who's a slumlord, who recently, because he would not repair one of his tenants' overflowing plumbing systems, sewage systems, he would rather go to jail than do that. This is a black guy, okay, a little bit older than me. This was well publicized to me. He would rather go to jail. And I told him, I don't know of one white millionaire that would go to jail because they did not want to fix one of their tenants' plumbing systems. That was documented. The stuff that the sewage is overflowing in the backyard. Okay, but this guy has slum houses all over the black sections of Macon that he won't fix. He charges very, very low. He says, I'm doing these people a favor. I'm only charging them $100, $200 a month to stay in a house that has holes all in the roofs, that don't have heating systems, that still, in one case, had outdoor outhouses. Okay, he said, I'm doing a favor. Okay, so what I'm saying is, we don't know. Our education level, in terms of what our perception of wealth is very, very poor, in my humble opinion.
But before you go to that, because like I said, you had this experience I don't have. Would you? And you're not a psychologist, and I'm literally I'm just curious, because I remember my dad saying this to me. My dad said this to me, and Marvin knew my dad. My dad said, do you think that your grandfather on my mom's side, if he could, would have stayed down there in Augusta with his wealth if he didn't have to. And I remember saying to him, it didn't matter whether I think he should have stayed. The question should have been, should he have stayed? And I say that to say, because I can tell a story about my dad and why he said he became an attorney, which I've never told on here. Do you think that system of brutal segregation in the South created a sort of self-hate for the people who got out of it to look at lower income blacks? Or do you think they had a legitimate point when they say, well, the people that's not in my income bracket don't have the will to do better? Because that's what I hear a lot today. I mean, I'm asking you as somebody that's older, do you think that's legitimate, or do you think, no, they were just dead ass wrong, and whether that they were just wrong? Do you my question, did that question make sense?
Yes. I think yes and no. Yes, it's wrong to look at our brethren in a different light because of their economic situation. But I also understand that you don't want to be, you are trying to go in one direction and they want to stay in another. So in that case, you can't stay down there with them. You're not going to tell, as I told my children, don't think you're not better than them, but you cannot hang with them, if you understand what I'm saying.
Not quite. Tell me what you mean. Tell me, and I'm gonna tell you why I say that in a minute.
Okay.
Tell me what you mean.
For example, there was this kid that my son used to hang around with or want to hang around with. And I told him he couldn't hang around with it because this particular kid is going in a different direction than you. And sure enough, that's what happened. This kid now has 3 or 4 children by 2 or 3 different mothers. He's been in jail 2 or 3 times. His family, his father, my wife hates him because of the condition of his yard, but they're not going to change. And you know, it's some people you just can't change. And if you say you lay with a dog and you come up with fleas,
right?
That's the way I look at it. You're moving in a different direction.
I'm gonna let you comment on what Dr. Lally just said, because he dying over there, Marion. He dying. He dying, Marion. You know, if he was on the show, Marion, he'd still be talking. He dying over there.
I agree with Dr. Lally on that statement.
Okay.
You know, but for example, and I just learned this the other day. There are 150 black doctors in Bibb County, Macon, Georgia. I didn't know it was that many. And the reason I didn't know it was that many because the majority, the lion's share of them are not in private practice. Macon has a large tier 1 hospital, and a lot of them work for the hospital, or they're affiliated with the Mercer Medical School, or they're hiring themselves out with the majority of physicians. But in terms of them having private practices, no.
But they don't live amongst the black. I look, you know, I got a history with Macon. I don't see a lot of the black doctors in Macon living amongst black people anyway.
No.
And one of the things I tell people about the beauty of Atlanta is you can go and see magnificent black suburbs of black professionals in Atlanta and DeKalb County. And I don't mean just pockets. So here, because I know we're coming to the end of the show, and I know you told me you had somebody coming over. and I want to do this more often with older people, but I think it's important. What?
May I answer Dr. Lively? No, we do not give up on them. Okay. I'm not saying giving up on them, but you can't lay down with them.
How do you split the baby then, Marion?
Because
I'm here. I'm literally in a community right now. And you know this. I'm in a community right now. I've just been named a chairman of neighborhood planning unit. How do you split the baby? Because this divide between educated and non-educated, to me, has not worked. Not in the experience I'm looking at right now. And I get it, because a lot of people in the neighborhood right now who you're trying to help push harder back on you than the people who you would call your quote unquote enemies. Like, getting back to what you said earlier, maybe this is where I am. We somehow dropped the ball on the history lesson, because you said it. Jews are look, whether you like what they do or not, their model has been successful. But I also would add, in the United States, they have a great influence on the United States, which I don't have a problem with. When people get out,
I don't either.
I'm like, shit, this is a capitalistic society. What the hell did y'all want them to do? You know how many times, as my little brother told me, you know how many times Jews have been kicked out of countries? So at some point, they made the decision to say, we're not going to keep letting this happen to us. And I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. But what do you think is, where do we start? Because you and I started this conversation off. Okay, y'all know I'm on a tangent, but I want to be clear about it before I leave the show. Me and Marion started this conversation on actually coming to the show. We were talking about the last election, and I keep telling him, do you believe that our community has to look at elections differently because we're affected the most by them? In other words, we can't go into it looking at it like everybody else, because the consequences are so dire for us, right? Like right now, if you look at this incoming cabinet, do you see any friends at the top to us?
No, even the folks who are our skin folks in the few that are there in the Trump administration. These folks, as they say, they're our skin folks, but they're not our kin folks.
Who has a cabinet position? What you talking about, the dude for HUD?
I'm talking about the few folks. I'm talking about even the Indians in there that have our hue. They're not our friends.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And
absolutely.
But what we, in my opinion, no, I'm not saying don't associate with folks. I'm going to say this, use this as an example. With you and Dr. Lively, if y'all have sacrificed your children in a school system or school that was rated at the bottom of the barrel, or would you have moved them?
I don't know. I'm gonna tell you why. I got to answer that, and I hope Marvin still listening to this, because Marvin and I had a long conversation earlier this week, and she was talking about her sister Brenda, who was my first crush. I remember Brenda used to say, "That's my Leonard," and we were talking about some of the issues that Brenda had, and Marvin said to me, "I don't know." Brenda was the oldest, and she was the first one to go to Strom Thurmond. And I don't know how that aggressive racism affected Brenda. I just know that she had, I'm going to bring you on too, Marvin, because we're going to do this older person stuff a lot. Older than me, Marvin, you know what I mean? You still look good. And she said to me, honestly, I don't know how that affected her when I look back on it. I don't know if that sent her off, this sacrificing of kids, as you say. But what I do know is this, and I know this from reading the book, The Children. I do know that James Bevel, during the Birmingham Children's Movement, is what it was called, told Martin Luther King that you had to be willing to sacrifice you had to be willing to sacrifice children as young as 5. And Dr. King told him, you're crazy. And James Bevel, who was a brilliant strategist, said, if you aren't willing to sacrifice children to Bull Connor, we will never move forward. And that's how they got the Birmingham Children's Movement. And father said, I cannot come down to the sports. I'm going to. So is that where we are? Is that if you're not willing to sacrifice?
No, I remember those times, and they were talking about using the children as the shield, as the spear point, because the adults could lose their jobs because they were working for the man.
Right.
So the teachers, for example, social workers, whatever, whereas children, there's nothing you can do with them economically. That's what I think that's what they were talking about then. So the high school kids, in fact, during those times, the high school kids, whatever, looked at it as fun to be going marching.
Till them hoses hit.
I beg your pardon?
Until those hoses hit.
Yeah, until the hoses hit, but it was fun. It was like going on a camping trip. Whereas the older folks were telling them, no, baby, don't do that. Because if Master Charles find out whose kids you are, then I'm gonna get in trouble.
Okay, you see, my friend Michael Stokes just made a comment, and I don't know if you mean we shouldn't or the reason we can't get anywhere because we refuse to. Kenneth, I don't. What? I'm just perplexed at where we go, because are we at a point where we just need to leave certain people behind, that we can't save everybody?
That's correct.
Where are we saying low performing schools or predominantly Black schools? Where? Tell me what you think about this statement. We are a permanent minority. Would you agree with that statement in the United States? I'm talking about African Americans.
Oh, definitely.
We don't have the numbers.
We don't have, and it surprises to me how much we have accomplished based on our numbers.
It's a miracle.
And based on our not on our numbers, but the participation percentage of the people who do out here trying to do something. Because it's an increasing share of us that have decided to drop out.
Okay, so with that being said, because I want to address something, if Kenneth was here, he would be addressing it, saying, I don't know what he meant when he said low performing predominantly Black schools. Is it a big difference? Because we just came out with a list of low performing schools in the state of Georgia, and I can tell you right now, quite a few of them are predominantly Black. I can tell you right now, we shouldn't. Over the years, we have, and we're further. Oh, I agree with you. And this is one of the things that I would say. And Mike, you're welcome to come on to the show too. One of the things I've been saying since I've been in the middle of this is this divide between the highly educated, the talented 10th. And it's funny that we right back out here. Wouldn't you agree, Marion, that this divide between the quote unquote talented 10th and the quote unquote working class has not served us well? It's not served us well.
Well, I think the reason why it hasn't served us well,
okay,
is because, again, I go back to leadership. We as a people are rudderless, and we are going to have to somehow get back together. But we can't do it if we think our leaders are coming from the entertainment class. I'm talking about like Oprah, or we think it's going to come from the athletic class, like LeBron.
You consider her an entertainer? I consider her.
Yes, I consider her an entertainer. Yes.
I consider her a why do you consider somebody like this done what she's done just an entertainer? As much
Because
as
that's where her show, it's all been on the entertainment realm, as far as I'm concerned.
okay.
She's an entertainer.
Are you what that's a Mark Marion, we're gonna have you back because that's a whole nother conversation. All right,
But in terms of black business people, I mean, you name a black business person that's a social leader. Can you name one?
I can name a few of them.
I'm talking about on a national scale.
But I don't think that's their fault, though. I think here's another conversation Mary and I have all the time. I don't think it's fair to ask people, and I see people do this on social media all the time, where are the black billionaires? And I always go, yeah, but you're not the one making them black billionaires. Like, if you want power over black billionaires, you have to be the ones that's lining their pockets. And if you think that somebody's just going to sacrifice their in a capitalist society, they're just going to I agree, LeBron James. If you think that there's and he, because he's so public with it, you aren't going to attack LeBron James but so much. But if you don't support what they do, like Robert Smith, like when Robert Smith gave you that $40 million to Morehouse, no one took note that a year later their IRS was coming after him like it was nuts. And we didn't come back as a people of 34 million. And Kenneth does not like this. He and I argue about this all the time. You know it. My whole thing was at 34 million, we should have gave him the money back and let him reinvest it again. Because he showed us he was going to do it for us. I don't understand the disconnect. And so when you say, well, it can't come from the entertainment class, what's our responsibility to those people? Mary, I'm gonna let you go on that. You take the last. What do we have a responsibility to those people if we want them to get into this fight?
I'm trying to understand your question.
Do we as the community have a responsibility to protect those people if we're asking them to get into this fight and protect them financially so that they can speak on our behalf? You told me this one time, the Anti-Defamation League, they don't care about what no black folks think because all their money comes from Jewish people.
That's correct.
And all those Anti-Defamation League leaders know that their bills are going to get paid, period. So they can say what they want to say. Do we owe that to NAACP leaders and business leaders who come out on our behalf?
Yes. Okay. For example, Mark Marial, and you know who he is. He's right. The head of the Urban League.
Right.
He recently came out talking about the economic impact of a Trump administration. And my good friend Roland Martin,
yes,
talked about that because he said he was glad that Mark came out because he's been waiting on that. Because even though Mark Marial and the Urban League get a sizable amount of their money from white businesses, he thought that they were being timid and not speaking out about Trump and the economic impact that he's going to have. And it's going to be an eye-opener, as I've been telling folks, when on January the 21st, 2025. And me and my wife doesn't like me to say this, but I'm going to say it on your show with a few people here watching, that Trump may be what we need. The second dose of Trump may be what wakes people up. Because
you mean our community?
Our community.
Okay.
Wakes us up because he's the people that he has in his administration, the Robert Kennedys, the Stephen Millers, the Tulsi Gabbards, you name them. The things that they're going to implement going forward is going to have a huge impact on us. For example, what Trump what his courts have done in terms of affirmative action. The University of Georgia, for example, now has the lowest number, percentage-wise, of Black folks attending that school than having 20 years. Because Black kids are not going. Some of them not even applying. So he's going to have a huge impact. I see where Michael said totally disagree. So I don't understand what he was talking about. Totally disagree. But if he's talking about totally disagree with me in terms of what my statement is.
Yeah, I think he said he totally disagree that it'll wake us up, and it might be the best thing to happen.
I think Michael, I got a brother named Michael. I know is going to wake us up, because sometimes you need a kick in the butt, and Trump is going to give us that kick in the butt, because we're going to now have to be forced to rely on each other, because the great investor Warren Buffett has now, if you read about it, he's gone $325 billion in cash, because he sees what's getting ready to happen. And as he said, if you understood what happened during the Great Depression of the late 1920s, the 1930s, some of the people who got over the most were the very, 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 very rich, because they bought stuff at a very, 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 very low price. And it's going to happen again, in my humble opinion.
And I'm going to say this too. What a lot of people don't understand, I didn't even understand it. It made sense that during the Great Depression, a lot of Black people had cash because they couldn't put their money in the bank.
That's correct.
So they stuffed it. So they have been building up cash more so than white folks, because they couldn't bank anywhere.
Right.
I would say, let me see what my sister has to say. So many people don't learn from consequences, and Trump may be the consequence. People need to wake up. I would say this, and this is why I've been talking to you a lot. I am just amazed that so many people have tucked their tails and decided to lay down. I guess I understand Christmas is coming up, but they are not sleeping on this. They are working every day to tee this up. And there is not a person in that administration, in my opinion, that likes our community. Not one. Tulsi doesn't, Vivek doesn't, Kash Patel definitely doesn't. And two of those people's parents are over here because of us. Not in spite of us. You got here because of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. And it's amazing to me to watch people like us not be able to group up. And I say group up because the only way you're going to survive is as a group. I'm talking to friends who I just think they have a cognitive dissonance. I've literally said to him, "You don't think you're going to be affected by this?" And I'm talking about successful people. There's not one friend we have at the top of that administration.
Not one.
But go and ask yourself how many Jewish representatives, whether you like their policies or not. I tell people, whether you like Stephen Miller or not, whether you like Jared Kushner or not, whether you like the guy that's going to be in charge of the Treasury or not, they are of the Jewish religion. And they are going to look after their community the way they're supposed to look after their community. And it's amazing to me, and this is why I always talk to you, it's amazing to me to watch these tippet-ass Black representatives who know they're protected because they get government checks, right? As long as they're in office, they're going to make good money. Not be out here in the streets going, what, y'all, this is coming down the pipeline. What the hell did we elect them for? And that's from the state representatives, some of the local representatives, to the federal representatives. What did we elect you for? You didn't inspire Black people to vote the way they were supposed to vote. You just didn't, because the truth of the matter is she lost by enough millions of votes. So me and Kenneth talked about this, of the Black people who didn't vote. I mean, she lost by 4 million people. There were way more than 4 million registered Blacks.
Way more than 4 million Blacks that didn't vote.
Registered Blacks that didn't vote.
That didn't
way
vote.
more. So My last question, I'm gonna let you go. It's 11:17. Do you think black ministers who traditionally, when you were growing up, had almost all the sway in the neighborhoods, why do you think that their power of persuasion has diminished?
That is a sore subject with me. I think
You want to wait till next week?
the current black ministers, and I put quotes on them, they are after, and there's even one of them whose last name was Dollar. They're after the dollar. And whereas the black ministers during my time, and I can name 10 of them around here in the Middle Georgia area, their emphasis was on civil rights, social rights, human rights. They were not concerned about the dollar. But now, everybody, there was one in Macon here that he lived in the Unionville area, and his parishioners, bought him a Bentley. A Bentley.
Now, do you have a problem with them buying him a Bentley, or that he hasn't, or that why did they buy him a Bentley? Tell me the biggest issue you have with the purchase of the Bentley.
Because his majority of his constituents are poor.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. This is not a big middle class mega church.
Okay.
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 He probably has 800 members.
Okay. Got it.
But they bought him a Bentley.
Got it.
Okay. And so that's what I have a problem with. And so did you consider T.D. Jakes a leader of the civil rights movement? I wouldn't.
What would you consider him?
I consider him an entertainment preacher.
Are they mutually exclusive?
Back then, our preachers entertained. Okay. But they were not so whole hog looking out for themselves.
All right.
That to me, that's the difference. And they went to this prosperity way of prosperity gospel that we keep thinking we should be thinking about the by and by. We should be thinking about the here and now. The black church, in terms of organization, for the longest, is where black folks put their money. You could see what you could do if you put your money where your mouth is.
As a group.
I mean,
you raised to buy land.
Right. You bought the land, you built the buildings, you maintained them. Even when I was with you, in Africa, in Ghana. Oh, even over there, the most well-kept buildings in Ghana are the churches. So we seem to be doing that. Don't have a problem with doing that. But we can't seem to get together and give our black business people 5% of our business.
So, Mary, end the show with that story about the Catholic priest and the black bank in Macon, please.
Oh yeah, it's a good friend of mine. He came from Alabama, and he had done the same thing in Montgomery, Alabama. He had started a black co-op.
What's his name, Mary?
Richard Kyle. He's very well known in this.
You all can look him up. I went and looked him up.
We can look him up. He's very well known here in the Middle Georgia area. Okay, so as he was our priest, I remember St. Peter Claver Catholic Church in Macon, Georgia. Has been in business here in Macon since 1888. He decided he wanted to do the same thing in Macon, Georgia. Start a black bank, a black co-op. So
he's a white guy, y'all. This is a white guy.
Oh yeah, he's very white from Wisconsin. Okay. So he decided that he would go to the largest black churches in Bibb County to get them to seed the money, because St. Peter Claver, our parish, we didn't have enough money to seed a black co-op. So he decided to go to the black churches in Bibb County, large ones. And I was there at the meeting, and he couldn't get it done because they were bickering. For example, one particular black church says, if my church gives 30% of the money, shouldn't our members have access to 30% of the bank's co-op's funds? And Richard said, no. The money goes in the pot, and this money is for everybody. Okay? And they just couldn't understand that. So that's what I'm talking about, crabs in a barrel.
Okay. All right, y'all. Marion, will you come back on?
Yeah, sometime. And this time I will make sure I have something water to drink because talking for over an hour, I didn't know how dry your mouth gets.
Man, Kenneth don't have that problem.
But I've enjoyed it, and I thank those Marvin, and I see where Harriet is on here, and Michael, and I thank them, those few, for coming on here that I see, and I thank them for coming on and letting me tell them a little bit about the Makanga, as we call it, which is another name for Macon, Georgia.
Okay, Makanga. Okay, Mary, you definitely coming back on. Anybody else that wants to come back on, please do. I'll send you an invitation. And what I am going to do is we only have a limited amount of time to get people who lived through segregation to tell us what segregation was. And
we're leaving this earth, buddy.
Huh?
We're leaving this earth.
Yeah, I want to have more of them on to tell their stories, to tell those of us who are in our 50s and heading into our 60s, hey, this is what we think you need to do. And so if I send you an invitation, come on, please don't turn us down. It's a little show, but it needs to be said, and it's recorded. So, Marion, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on such short notice.
It's very short notice.
Yeah, very short notice. Kenneth didn't tell me till early. We've been trying to get you on the show for 2 years. he didn't know how to work his browser, Kenneth. That's what it came down to. He literally didn't know how to work his browser.
Because I have an Apple.
Thanks, Roz. Anyway, y'all have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next week. You gonna be able to say that next week? You come on.
Oh, you will be going to San Francisco next Saturday.
I will be on the West Coast.
Roz, he can't do a show from the West Coast.
He can. We'll
all this technology. He can do a show.
I'll be 35,000 feet, my brother.
That's all right. They got internet on the plane, bro. It's expensive, but they got it. It works. All right. All right, y'all. We'll see y'all next week. Peace. He a celebrity now, Roz. Look at him giving up the peace sign. Bye, Mary. Bye, Roz.